Look at almost any screen around you, and you are looking at the work of one man. The television, the device that shaped the entire 20th century, that carried wars and moon landings into every living room on Earth. It was not invented by a famous scientist in a great laboratory. It was dreamed up by a teenage farm boy alone in a field. And he would die broke and almost completely forgotten. Some people change the world, and the world never learns their name. This is without whom. His name was Philo Farnsworth. He was born in 1906 in a small log cabin in Utah and grew up on a farm out in Idaho. For part of his childhood, his home did not even have electricity. But Philo was a different kind of boy. He devoured science magazines, tinkered with the farm machinery, and dreamed about electricity and about a strange new idea, sending pictures through the air. Then came the moment that changed history, in the most ordinary place imaginable. Around the age of 14, Farnsworth was plowing a potato field, turning the soil one straight row at a time. And as he stared at those endless parallel lines, an idea struck him. What if you could paint a picture the very same way? Line by line, row by row, using a beam of tiny particles, faster than the eye could ever follow. It was an astonishing leap, a moving image, broken into hundreds of lines and rebuilt in an instant, all with electricity and no moving parts at all. The boy was so sure of it that he sketched the whole system on a blackboard for his high school teacher. The teacher did not fully understand it, but he kept the memory of that drawing, and one day it would save everything. Here is what makes the idea so remarkable. At the time, other inventors were chasing television too, but they were building clumsy machines full of spinning discs and whirring parts. Farnsworth believed all of that was a dead end. He was certain the future was purely electronic, a picture drawn by an invisible beam. He was a poor teenager with no money and no degree, betting against the experts. And he was right. For years, the dream burned in him. As a young man, he managed to convince a few investors to gamble on his wild idea. With their backing, he set up a small laboratory in San Francisco and got to work, racing to build the impossible machine he had first imagined as a boy in that field. In 1927, it finally happened. Farnsworth was just 21 years old. In his little lab, he switched on his invention, and across a small screen, a single line of light appeared, sent purely by electronics. It worked. In that quiet room, with almost no one watching, the age of television had just begun. But his backers were anxious men. They had poured their money in, and they wanted to know when it would finally pay off. As the story is told, when they kept asking when they would see some dollars from the invention, Farnsworth answered them in his own way. He pointed his camera at a simple drawing, and onto the screen he sent the very first thing many of them truly cared about. A dollar sign. It was a small joke with an enormous meaning. Farnsworth had built something that could carry moving pictures into every home on the planet. He held the key patents. He had beaten the whole world to it. The future of how humanity would see itself rested, for one brief moment, in the hands of a farm boy. And that was exactly the problem. Because a vast and powerful company had also set its sights on television. It was one of the biggest electronics empires in America, and its boss was a ruthless, brilliant man, determined to control this new medium completely. He did not just want to sell televisions. He wanted his company to be remembered forever as the place where television was born. And so the company sent its own top scientist to visit Farnsworth's laboratory. Trusting and hopeful, Farnsworth welcomed him in and showed him exactly how his system worked. The visitor spent days studying every detail. Then he went back to the company, which built its own version, and began telling the world that they had invented electronic television. What followed was a brutal, years-long battle. The company unleashed its army of lawyers to attack Farnsworth's patents, insisting that one of their own people had thought of it first. On one side stood a giant corporation with almost unlimited money. On the other stood a single inventor, fighting for the one thing that was truly his. And then the case turned on a memory. To prove he had invented the system first, Farnsworth's side needed evidence from years before. So they found his old high school teacher. And that teacher, from memory, redrew the exact diagram that a 14-year-old boy had once chalked on his classroom blackboard. It was proof. The idea had come to a farm boy years before the giant company ever touched it. In 1935, Farnsworth won. It was a stunning victory. By 1939, the mighty company was finally forced to do something it had never done before. It agreed to pay Farnsworth for the right to use his invention. For a moment, it seemed the farm boy had truly won, beaten the empire, and earned his place in history. But fate had one more cruel turn waiting. Just as television was ready to explode across the world went to war. For years, factories stopped making televisions and built weapons instead. The whole industry froze, and by the time peace returned and televisions finally began pouring into homes everywhere, Farnsworth's key patents had run out. The invention he had given his life to was about to earn billions, and he would see almost none of it. Worse still, the world forgot him. The powerful company and its boss took the public credit, and most people came to believe that television had been born in a corporate laboratory. The name Philo Farnsworth faded into the shadows. He battled money troubles, illness, and a deep sadness, as the medium he created lit up a world that no longer knew his name. In 1957, Farnsworth appeared on a popular national television game show as a mystery guest. They called him Dr. X. A panel of famous people fired questions at him, trying to guess his secret. Not one of them could. None of them realized that the quiet man before them had invented the very thing they were watching him on. For stumping them, he won $80 and a carton of cigarettes and went home. But Philo Farnsworth never stopped inventing. Over his life, he earned hundreds of patents, and late in his years, he reached for an even greater dream than television, trying to harness the power that lights the stars themselves, the energy of nuclear fusion. He chased it almost to the very end. He died in 1971, in poor health and deep in debt, far from the fame he deserved. But he was not entirely alone. Through every triumph and heartbreak, his wife had stood beside him, from the earliest days in the lab to the very end, and one moment, near the close of his life, finally gave him peace. In 1969, Farnsworth watched on television as human beings walked on the moon, and the whole world watched with him through the invention he had built. He told his wife that, at last, it had all been worth it. After his death, she spent her remaining years making sure the world would remember him. Today, a statue of Philo Farnsworth stands in the United States Capitol. So the next time you sit down in front of a screen, any screen, remember where it truly began. Not in a great laboratory, and not with a famous name, but with a 14-year-old boy, plowing a potato field, who looked at the lines in the dirt and somehow saw the future. He gave that future to all of us, and the world forgot to thank him. The world you live in was built by people you have never heard of. And now, you know one more name. Philo Farnsworth. Like and subscribe and stick around, because the textbooks left a lot out. Thanks for watching.